I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the fire building in the entire rear section.
Now remember, given the payday, has he been accounted for? Kate.
610B. That was the Mayday. 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Coming up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows vented below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor, second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, welcome to Old School. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my buddy, Chief John Salka. And John, we got some exciting news. Our book, 5-Alarm Leadership from the Firehouse to the Fireground, which is still best-selling. They've got it on Kindle finally, on Amazon's Kindle. So for our listeners, those of you that have been asking us for a long time, when are they going to be moving to Kindle with the hard copy books? 5-Alarm Leadership is now, if you go to Amazon.com, you type in 5-Alarm Leadership, you can either choose the hard copy or you can choose the Kindle version. And that'll, Pride and Ownership and all the rest of the books will be coming on there soon, as well as they're going to be moving them very soon, John, to iTunes and Audible for the audio books. So Pride and Ownership's audiobook.
Man, we are high tech, aren't we, man? We are just high tech.
and the audiobook that John and I just did on 5-Alarm Leadership, folks. Again, soon look for that. We'll let you know on iTunes and on Audible, whichever one you use. When you go to Kindle right now for 5-Alarm Leadership, Pride and Ownership's coming, and you can download it. So exciting news. Hey, John, you asked me the other day, I posted a picture. You and I had the honor of traveling all over and obviously teaching and visiting with folks. And every now and then we get asked to do a keynote at a graduation or an awards ceremony or a banquet. And I had the honor, John, of going out to Whitesboro, Texas, which is east of Gainesville, kind of north Texas there. And great group. What a great night. Wonderful people, as always. The Chiefs Dynamite, his staff, and everybody was great. But at the end, they presented me with a gift, which I'm you and I are always overwhelmed and honored to be where we're at. And it's the coolest thing, bud. It's a leather SCBA face piece cover that kind of has like the diamond plate background. It's got 343 on one side, I'll never forget. It's got a Chiefs front piece. It's got the 5 trumpets, Chief Lasky, the straps around the back. And it is freaking cool. It is pretty awesome. And
absolutely. I remember when you showed me, it was really, really wild. It was something I've never seen before, but actually was, like you just said, beautiful.
Oh, it was like the coolest thing. I'm looking at it right now. And there's a captain from Farmers Branch, Texas, Captain Jim, looks like Dennis, if I'm saying that right. But he's the one that does all the leather works, like leather cases and straps and radio straps and so on and so forth. And everything. And he made this. It's just cool. I had to mention it. So Whitesboro, thank you so much. What an honor. It was an honor to spend the evening with you. So that being said, John, one of the things I asked you about the other day, and we were just talking, we thought it'd be a good topic. There's some great video and some great pictures from, I think, a 3rd alarm at the FDNY the other day. Multiple floors, multifamily, I think multiple family dwelling, John. And they've got 4 or 5 aerial ladders up and have them sewn in. I mean, they've got them stuck in different positions. You and I have always talked in class about the importance of ladder placement, apparatus placement, line placement, supply line place. I mean, everything that goes into what we do when we respond to a call. Maybe we need to spend a little bit of time talking about apparatus placement. I don't know if you want to start with the truck first, truck companies, and then engines, or working them in unison or whatever. But I think it's something.
Absolutely.
I mean, that can make or break you, right? That can make or break you at a fire.
Yeah, and we've talked about it during some of our classes, and both of us involved in program development for different academies and schools and stuff like that. And I've read 100 times, and I've said 100 times, proper apparatus placement it's a foundation of a good operation. Obviously, everything doesn't hinge off that, but certainly a lot does. And when you start looking at where to put a rig, I've been a captain in 48 engine. That's the engine part of it, but I was an officer in a truck as well. Where the rig stops, or where it ends up, rather. Sometimes it stops and the guys get off, and then the chauffeur moves it. So one of the first things I want to bring up about apparatus positioning is the importance of the chauffeur, the importance of the truck chauffeur, the guy that drives the rig. Everybody calls them different things, and it doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about? The guy behind the steering wheel, right? It's so important, and some people just, they just poo-poo that. They're just like, oh, okay, you can drive today, Billy. You know how to drive, right? You know how to put it into PTO. Believe me, that's not all there is to know. There's so much to know when it comes to driving. I mean, frankly, that's really almost a whole topic by itself, like the apparatus chauffeur, all the things I got to know. But I want to touch on it briefly because I think it's an important part of apparatus positioning is you got to have chauffeurs, you got to have drivers, engineers on engines and truck chauffeurs on trucks that know how to, not only how to drive the rig physically, how to handle it, steer it, brake it, turn it, make turns and stuff, but where it'll fit in, where the turntable is. You got a tiller with the turntable 6 feet behind the front seat, or you got to rim out with the tiller, not the tiller, but the turntable, 30 or 40 feet behind, or a midship maybe with the turntable, halfway down. It's real important where the turntable goes on what you want to do, whether you're going to put a ladder pipe up or make a rescue, or it's going to be for roof access for a firefighter. So, gosh, the guy driving a rig, the guy or the gal driving a rig is so important. And it's not just being able to handle the rig and physically drive it and operate it, but how to set it up, where to set it up, where to put it. I remember, and I have it somewhere. I have a picture. You've probably seen it. It's 56 truck in the Bronx, parked up on the curb. It was a street where there's telephone poles right down the curb, big old wooden telephone poles with 2 or 3 or 4 cross pieces up at the top with all sorts of layers of wires. The top, the high voltage and all sorts of stuff. And then the buildings were only 10 feet off the curb. So this guy actually pulled up the truck, up on the curb, all 4 wheels, both axles up on the curb, put the tormentors down, and when he raised the aerial ladder, he was actually right under the wires. All he had to do was rotate to the right a little bit, and there he was, putting his 100-foot aerial ladder up to a 4-story building, and there was no other way he was going to reach it other than getting that rig and its turntable under the wires. Nowhere on the street would have been able to do it. There were too many wires and too many different levels. And I looked at that, man, oh man, what a great testament to the fact that the truck chauffeur knew what he was doing. The truck officer probably didn't even know he was doing it. Probably got off the rig and went in the building. And there's a guy that knew where his turntable had to be, knew he had a unique situation, and got it done. So I don't want to, take the whole time up tonight talking about the chauffeurs, but that's a real important part of proper apparatus positioning is having somebody behind the wheel that knows how to do it. The captain can't stay outside for 10 minutes directing you and backing you up and positioning the rig,
Well, and that comes down to, like you said, the training part of it. First of all, knowing your rig. You said something before, you just can't jump, you just can't, all right, hey, you're driving tonight, John. You've driven a rig before, jump in or you go, and it's just thrown to PTO and all stuff. It's about being familiar with, you've got to know that rig backwards and forwards, right? You've got to be comfortable. You've got to know that as well as you know your own car, and if not better, because there's obstacles we got to deal with, and that's cars in the street, that's other buildings, that's wires, trees, everything. It just goes on and on, the list of obstacles we have to deal with in all types of weather. It's the training part of it. And I used to pride myself, John, both with the aerial ladder. I had a 100-foot stick Seagrave, and then I had a snorkel. And that was pulling it out and setting it.
Oh, snorkels. I love them snorkels.
Yeah. Well, they were good, but they had their, they had their limitations. And I want to talk about Chicago squads in a second because they do a phenomenal job with placement there. But John, I used to pull it on the apron, and I had different points. I had different, like, let's just talk with the ladder truck. I could pull it out, but then I just practicing, setting the jacks, but taking the main out of the bed. And I had the top of this tree, this part of the roof, that part of the flagpole, back and forth, up and down, back, retract, extend, all that, little areas to kind of spot for my distance. Some guys just pull out, bud, and they stick the ladder up in the air and they spin around circles. And I'm like, that's one thing. But to be comfortable spotting it, to be comfortable with knowing what you can and what you can't do with it. Your reach, you said it, first knowing your rig. If you go from a mid mount, which I like mid mounts, but I guess every rig has its plus and minuses, but you have to know, like you said, if it's a rear mount, so many people nose in and you talk about positioning, they lose the length of the rig on their main ladder. Instead of spinning around or positioning where their ass is close enough or off a corner, we got to adhere to collapse zones and things like that. But you see so many of these fires where they pull up and they've got the aerial extended out over the cab, which you just gave up all that ladder length. I know sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but trying to get the most out of your ladder, I guess being a roofer as long as I was, I got pretty good at estimating how much I needed ladder size, because this isn't like the cartoons where you can nail a ladder on the end of the ladder like on a Bugs Bunny thing or something like that. Right. You've got to make sure you've got these things placed in the right position when you set your jacks, because there's very little moving around later on after that. I want to mention real quick before I forget about it, but you've seen the pictures, John. We've got some good guys in Chicago. Another great fire department. They're squad companies, which are the 55-foot snorkels. I'm amazed and actually just proud of how there's times they stick those between buildings, around buildings, on lawns, sidewalks. They get those things moving, and even the area ladders. It's sometimes to make a rescue, to get where they got to get. Look, not advocating wrecking your rig, but they'll pull up. They'll have the cab of the rig up out onto the parkway, setting their outriggers in the streets, or they short jack, sometimes that they have to, and make sure they've got, just watching them spot their rigs is phenomenal on how they do it. And again, this isn't by mistake, and it isn't a guess. It is a thing they train for, John, all the frickin' time, is apparatus placement.
Absolutely. And like I always tell a story about Willie Tracy, and it's an engine story, but it's still a valid story about pulling up to a job one day. I'm in the right seat, I'm the captain, he's the engineer, and we're pulling up, but it's a job. Give it 1075. It's a good frame going, and a short driveway between, and the frame next door is going to be on fire in a minute. I mean, it's roaring, right? And I'm like, okay, Willie, good, stop here, and he's not stopping. Willie, stop. And he's still rolling forward. Not very fast, but he's still rolling forward. Actually, the guys are climbing out in the back. The crew doors are open already. The guys are climbing off the back of the rig. And he's still, I'm like, Willie, stop the damn rig. And finally he stops. And I jump out with a huff, and we go put the fire out. When I come back later on, I'm like, what was that all about? And he said, and he points up to the deck pipe. He said, I knew I was going to use a deck pipe. I knew you guys are going over the line, but I knew I was going to use a deck pipe to protect both exposures. You couldn't do everything. He said, and that box truck was right in front. That little delivery truck was right in front of the house. He said, there was no way I was going to use that deck pipe when you said stop. I knew I had to go 10 feet further to get past it, at least get the deck pipe past it. It didn't impact my connection to the hydrant. It didn't impact you guys stretching your line, but I knew that if I stopped where you said stop, the deck pipe would have been out of service for this job. And I was like, how excellent that he knew what to do, and he knew to ignore me and get past that truck. I mean, he could have said something and lightened my burden. But and that's the kind of stuff we want. We want people in the front seat that know what they're doing and are thinking ahead. Here's a guy, he's an engineer. He's got a cigar in his mouth and a baseball hat on, and he's thinking about, can I use a deck pipe when I stop here? And that's what we want. That's an important, and certainly truck chauffeurs do the same thing lots of times.
Well, and you've talked about him before when it comes to checking hydrants and knowing which hydrants are out of service ahead of time. That goes the same way, Bud, right? When it comes to the less emphasis some people put on pre-plans, getting out and not just getting to a building, but the neighborhoods surrounding the streets, access, one-ways, two-way street, everything that goes into it. Knowing ahead of time it's going to be a tight squeeze. Knowing ahead of time that you're going to have to come in from the west on this particular call. Or like you said, maybe the engine's getting in there first. A lot of people, when they listen to Chicago, you'll hear Chicago say, 18, engine 18's out on Roosevelt Road, blah, blah, blah. We're facing eastbound, we're facing westbound, we're southbound. And a lot of people don't know what that's for. And a lot of that has to do with just, we're facing southbound, we're facing eastbound. This is where we're at, telling everybody else which way they need to come in to make it work. Because once you set that, once you take the lines off, first of all, let's talk about the engine placement. Again, back to pre-plans, back to getting out and driving your neighborhoods, back to knowing your rig, the capabilities and the limitations and what's on it and how to handle it, and how to maneuver around. Forget even the areas with snow or whatever that kind of limits you. We talked already about all the obstacles, but again, pulling up, knowing you just talked about Willie Tracy, knowing that the deck gun wasn't going to work where you wanted him to stop. He knew that. Same goes for, okay, once I stop and we start dragging hose off this thing, we're kind of stuck. Once I have people in there on the line, fighting fire, making a hallway, making the stairs, whatever they're doing, I can't call Captain Salka on with his crews on the line and say, hey, Cap, I gotta shut you down for a second. I gotta pull up 15 feet because I blocked the truck. So as long as you were doing the battalion chief thing, long time in the FDNY and the 18th Battalion, a busy battalion, John, talk about the importance of the engine and truck, or the engines and trucks. Now, let's just talk first engine, first truck, knowing and working together when it comes to placement, how key that is to making or breaking, an incident. Those two officers, or those two rigs, those chauffeurs, they not only do they need how to talk to each other, but they need to know what's on each other's minds, don't you think?
Right. And and for the FDNY, of course, and where I spent most of my career, obviously I was in a bunch of different fire departments, earlier than once I got on the FDNY. But the point with the FDNY, which is great, is there's company policy and department policy, as far as response goes. If an engine and truck are in quarters and they're going out to the same alarm, the engine goes out first. That's all there is to it. The engine goes out first. Now, obviously, that's not random. They didn't roll a dice to do that or flip a coin. They figured that out because the way we have our hose packed, which is no cross lays, no pre-connects, all our hose comes off the back step. All our hose is dead loaded, meaning we just got piles of hose in the back. That's it. Hose comes off the top, and if you pull it all off, the last one comes off, and the coupling hits the ground. It's not attached to anything. So, having said that, you know that when you pull up to the front of the building, you're probably just going to pull off whatever you need off the back, and then the rig's going to drive away. It's going to go down a block to a hydrant, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 100 feet, whatever it is, right? 250 feet. So the truck has to be behind the engine because you have to let the engine stop first, unload their hose, and then give them the room in front of the engine apparatus to move forward and go to a hydrant. If the truck pulls in front of the engine and the engine pulls up to the fire building, sure, we can still stretch our hose, but now somebody's going to have to hand jack some hose back to a hydrant somewhere.
Right.
Or you might not be able to connect to a hydrant via a hydrant connection. You might have to do via, 3-inch hose or something like that. So right off the bat, we have the engine going in front of the truck, which is great because that allows the engine to get there first, pull off the hose right in front of the building for a nice short stretch, and then the rig stretches the rest of the hose. If he goes 3 lengths down the block, that's all part of the initial line, but it's being laid by the engine, and the firefighters are going in the front door with the 3 lengths that they pulled off.
Well, and how important, John, is it again for that communication, if you will? When maybe you're coming from 2 different firehouses or from 2 different directions, but I've witnessed it. I've actually done it before, where we've held the truck at the intersection for a few seconds, not for minutes, but they're getting there. And it's like wait, let the engine slide in front of you. Let them come down because, sometimes I think in a hurry to get to the scene, we end up, serving as that big drain plug, you know what I'm saying? So I think, again,
absolutely. Some guys are in such a rush. Some officers and some chauffeurs and some people are so excited when there's a 1075 or a working fire or a single 10 or whatever it is, that they're just like moths going to a bulb, moths going to a light bulb. Everybody's screaming to the fire, running, going as fast as they can. And all of a sudden you realize, wow, we get 2 engines nose to nose in front of the building. We have no room for a truck, and neither one of them can connect to a hydrant. Now, I remember a great story, again, in a great place that I worked in, 48 engine and 56 truck. Mike Wilbur, well known by lots of people around the country. Mike's an apparatus guy, apparatus specs and delivery and writes every month and everything else about it. Mike was a chauffeur in 56 truck before he made lieutenant, went over to 27. And I'll tell you what, I remember going to a job one time. I was a captain of 48. Mike was working in 56. And the job was with 75 and 33. They were the first 2 companies. They gave a 1075. And as we rolled up the street, we got to the intersection. We were getting ready to turn off Fordham Road, which is a major thoroughfare, onto a smaller street, which was a one-way, and it was coming out. We were going to make a left and turn into a one-way street and go against traffic. Well, I came up and I pulled up to the corner, and we grabbed the hydrant right on the corner, and off the rig we got because we were going to walk down the block. And if we needed more hose or, whatever, our rig was good where it was. Mike Wilbur's getting ready to make the turn. And I hear Mike Wilbur, not the officer. I hear Mike on the radio. ladder 5.6 chauffeur to engine 7.5 chauffeur. What's he going to ask him? Are you on a hydrant? He wanted to make sure he was on a hydrant, because if 75 was not on a hydrant, Mike waited to hear that he was or wasn't on a hydrant. If he was not, Mike was going to wait at the corner and let 75 proceed down the block and tuck into a hydrant or come out of the block to find a hydrant. Some chauffeurs wouldn't do that. They'd wheel into the block and say, holy shit, I didn't know you weren't on a hydrant, but Mike thought ahead of it. So there's Mike as a truck chauffeur worrying about if the engine's on a hydrant yet, and talk about everybody looking at the big picture, talking about proper training and proper interaction between trucks and engines. I thought that was a fantastic story, and I witnessed it myself.
Well, and that's a truck guy understanding engine work, and the engine guy's understanding truck work. And whether you like being an engine, you don't like being a truck, or the other way around, or whatever, has nothing to do with it. We're a team, and you said it perfectly. Mike's thinking, before I go in there, I don't want to block them. If they're not on a hydrant, I don't want to be the one that screws this thing up and delays get water and all that, so on and so forth. So again, number one, like we talked about, it's knowing your area, pre-planning, knowing where your rigs fit, which direction, where your one-way streets are, everything else that you got to do, whether it's wide open or not, and knowing where to park your rig. I think some of it's the basics, John, is knowing as a driver, I've told people before, you really shouldn't have rigs set up where your hose beds dictate where you park the rig. I know cross lays, a lot of them, pre-connects are 200 feet, the H 3/4, so on and so forth. But you really, I think it's just a bad habit. Disagree with me if you want to, John, but I just, the one thing we should have enough of on the rig is hose if we need more. We shouldn't be allowing our hose beds to dictate necessarily where we have to park the rig.
Absolutely. Hose loads and hose stretching and the number of lengths of hose and whether you have a cross lay or off the rear of the bed, that should not dictate your tactics. Now, having said that, obviously sometimes people build rigs around their tactics. In other words, the tactics that being followed say, this will be great. Let's get everything off the side so we can pull up and you get these narrow streets and we don't have to worry about. So sometimes they do interact with each other, but there absolutely has to be some flexibility built into the system, whether it's trucks, whether it's engines. I mean, we've talked about it 1,000 times. Portable ladders off a truck. How many trucks do the portable ladders slide out of compartments straight out of the back of the rig? There's no other way to get a ladder off. You got to slide it straight back. Now you can't park an engine or a truck or a chief's car anywhere within 20 feet of a rig because you can't get the ladders off. Somebody else said, hey, let's load them off the side. Let's put them off the side so we don't have to worry about that. So obviously that simple fact, where the ladders are stored and how they get pulled off of a rig is going to dictate how close the next rig can get, or if anybody can even get behind that rig, Interesting.
So number one, our engine guys need to know their apparatus, just like the truck guys do. They need to know their area. They need to know the ins and out. They need to know placement. They need to know the hose lengths. And I think they need to be thinking about truck placement the way truck guys are thinking about engine placement and water and so like I said with Mike Wilbur, and knowing that, because that brings up another point, John, is, a lot of people are using quints out there, and they're using quints and they're using as their initial.
Using what?
Using quints as their initial, for their initial attack. And I said this in Louisville when we had them for the short time that we had them when I was there, till we moved on and went with just ladder trucks. If you're driving you want to talk about knowing your stuff. It's one thing to know your engine and know placement and hose loads and lays and all that stuff. It's another thing to be driving a 100-foot stick or better or mid-mount or whatever it is, and knowing where you're going. It's another thing when you've got a quint 75 or 100-footer and you're using that also, again, as your engine, your first due engine. I used to say this before, you better make sure the driver, the chauffeur, the engineer knows when you set your parking brake, you better be ready to set your jacks, because once you put it in pump, and again, Captain Salka's on the second floor, and some lady or guy comes out with a kid, the third floor balcony, this apartment building, and you go, now you go to swing the ladder up, and you can't because there's trees in the way or parking, overhangs and whatever. Right? You can't call Captain Salka again and go, hey, I got to shut your line down. I got someone on a window hanging off a balcony. I got to pull up a little bit. So I think the quint operators, if to our listeners, if you are driving a quint, don't ever sell yourself short, no pun intended, when it comes to your responsibility and the importance of being a driver operator of a quint, because you got to think on both fronts. You got to think on the engine front, and you got to think on the ladder truck front. And
you know what? And although you got to think about both of them, because you're potentially doing both or actually doing both, the truck positioning takes priority, because you can stretch hose and you can't stretch ladders. And I'm a big engine guy. I mean, I know plenty of fire departments without trucks. I've been to fires where we put the whole thing out before the truck got there. The point is, when you pull up with a quint and you got a building that's on fire, you have a fire, you got to position that apparatus for the best ladder coverage. I wouldn't even think about the hose. Why? Because you can stretch the hose around a parked car. You can stretch the hose towards the front instead of towards the rear. Maybe you're going to use an extra length of hose going a long way around. So hose is very flexible and very forgiving, and ladders are not. So again, you got to stress not worrying about that cross lay going straight into the front door. Maybe is a quick, rapid stretch, but say, you know what, Cap, sorry, you're gonna have to stretch a little bit longer. I got to pull down past this front door and get around this tree or around this pole. So those are things that engineers or drivers have to know.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the whole point. Is if you're driving a quint, you got to be thinking, don't blow off one over the other or get caught. Don't get snookered where you're like, again, we've talked about Stockton, California, the great job they do. They just posted a video. I've told people before, watch their videos at a hospital, John. A nothing showing call, stretched up a couple floors, fourth floor or whatever. They get up there and they got a room going. They got, they black. I mean, they open the door, black, big time smoke comes out of the unit to the hallway of a hospital. Now, again, nothing showing call. Don't get snookered. Chicago term. If you pull up and you're driving a quint, don't be lulled into a bad habit of, okay, now I gotta put it in pump. Oh, and now I gotta set my jacks. And I've said this before, John, I know you believe in it too. Every call we go to, you should be thinking the building's on fire. Until proven otherwise, be in your game mode. Have your game face on. The moment you leave the firehouse, the moment they set the tones off, they drop the tones, they rang the bells, you're thinking, okay, I know that street. I know accessibility. We've been there before. We had a job there, or I'm driven by that on the way to work. I know what I got to do. And on the way there, you're thinking, okay, we got a job, until you get there, right? And somebody says, nothing. We got nothing.
Anytime you're on the run, you go into a fire, right? And I've talked about that over the years. I've written articles on, I hate the term nothing showing. Right. I absolutely hate it. I don't think it should be allowed to be used. Now, obviously, when you get there and you don't see anything, there's nothing wrong with making that clear. Now, people say, well, what's the difference? What terminology you use? Nothing showing, nothing visible. I don't like downgrading. And I think you're verbally and mentally downgrading an incident when you say on the radio, call one on scene, nothing showing. Everybody who's listening, whether it's conscious or not, is starting to go,
okay, nothing.
A little sigh of relief, right? So by not saying that, what are you doing? By not saying nothing showing, by not saying nothing visible, everybody is still listening to the radio. They're still poised. They're still getting dressed for the second rig back at the house. They're still getting dressed. Anybody hear anything? Nope, they're not there yet. Everybody's still excited and thinking we might have something. When you say, Orange 911, South Blooming Grove, call one, on scene. Now, I rarely say that without saying something else. And what I say is, on scene, making an investigation. Or on scene, investigating. Now, that says you can deduct from that statement that I don't see anything. But I'm not saying, nothing's showing. You know what I'm saying? And a minute later, I can say, we got a smoke addition, and the thing could still turn out to be a fire or a job. And it's a great story. I know I've told this story before, and it's my story because it happened to me, and it just happened recently. And it was in South Blooming Grove. Right. Did I tell this story? I went to a box the other day. We report smoke in the house. We don't get many reported smokes in the house. Most of the time, that's a fire. And my car, too, gets there ahead of me. And I pull up behind him. And when he pulls up, before I get there, I hear car 2 on scene, nothing showing. He says nothing showing, and we've had our discussion about that. He says nothing showing. So now I'm thinking, of course, what am I thinking? Exactly what I said a moment ago. That's probably nothing now, right? So I go rolling up. He's standing out in the front lawn, walking towards the building. His car's on the front, with the lights on. There's a police car there, too. And one of the patrolmen comes walking up. Turns out this patrolman is an FDNY firefighter when he's on his full-time job. But he works part-time in a local police department. He comes walking up to me. How you doing, Chief? I said, good. He said, it's at 10:32. I shut it off already. 10:32. FDNY signal for an oil burner. So he says it's a 1032. Hey, Chief, it's an oil burner. I was already inside. I shut it down for you. Thanks. Now, he's an FDNY guy, so, if it was a regular cop, I'd be like, what? But it was a guy I knew, and I go walking inside. I must tell you, by the time when I walked inside, my first smell, the first thing I smelled was not an oil burner, and it was something either smoking or burning. So the first two people that got to the scene of that alarm was an assistant chief and a police officer who's a paid firefighter at his real job, and both of them had it wrong. Turns out it was a belt inside the wash machine in the basement that was hung up, and it was burning because the thing was spinning and the belt wasn't turning, and it was rubber and it was smoking. Could have turned out to be a fire, but the point was, both an assistant chief gave a nothing showing, and a police officer gave me it's an oil burner, and I turned it off, and they were both wrong. So forget PD on the scene advising the fire's out. The occupant called back and said it's just a candle, or it's just an oven, or it's just the food on the stove. We never take anything, and that's obviously a long story, not really necessarily about apparatus positioning, but so true. That's why, relating it to apparatus positioning, anytime you're pulling up, anytime you're pulling down a block, you're getting closer, you should park that rig like you're going to work, whether it's a truck, whether it's an engine at a Willie Tracy, the rig never, ever, 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 ever stopped. The wheels never stopped turning until 48 engine was where? At a hydrant. At a hydrant. Never stopped anywhere. He never stopped at red lights or nothing. Just at hydrants. That was it,
Well, and I agree with you. And, I've never had a problem, in Louisville. I mean, I could tell you a bunch of different stories of guys pulling up and, and you'll hear a young firefighter say, we're, medic one's out. We've got a one-story banking institution, nothing showing on all four sides, we'll be investigating. Or nothing showing from the front. And it tells the guys that, be looking in the back. And I'll forget that one, John, a real quick story, one of the BCs was on the east side of town. He says, is there a chief closer? It was a chief closer. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. And it's sunny day. I look out my window from my office. I can see the strip mall where this bank is. And it was, anyway, so Bank of America. So anyway, there's nothing. So I pull in, the tower ladder with Mark Lee. He's the captain of the truck. He's a chief in Garland, Texas. Mark is dynamite. Good guy. Good boss, good chief, great captain on the truck. So he pulls up, same thing, we'll be investigating. Gets inside and he starts calling for a 2.5, like now. And I'm like, a 2.5. I'm like, all right, so we got it. We're engine's stretching. I peek through the door. And they're masking up because they had their gear on. They were ready to go. We've talked about this before on the show. And there's fire rolling over his head out of his room. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, this thing went from nothing showing to zero visibility and a lot of fire in a heartbeat. So again, back to the nothing showing, lulling you to sleep. It would have been one of those where you pull up during the day and there's nothing there. Now, John, back to this whole apparatus placement thing, like we said, with Quince, engines, and trucks, not getting lulled into that complacency of nothing showing, until somebody says there's nothing on fire, we should be thinking where we need to go and how we need to go, because we're screwing ourselves out of some scrub surface, some reachability with our aerial ladders, right? Again, back to knowing, I remember Sal Marchese taught our guys, John, Sal Marchese off 142 truck in Queens, one of your good friends of mine. Yep. Great truckie, great FDNY firefighter. When he came out with Donnie Haid, God bless, love Donnie, and they did a truck class, Sal taught the guys, and none of them ever thought about with that mid-mount, when you pull up, if the address is on your left, taking the steering wheel when you come right as you're coming to a stop and throwing it to the right about 5 to 15 degrees. Just throwing it, just taking the cab of the rig and just giving a slight turn away from the fire building or the address, 5 to 50. He goes, what that's going to do for you, scrub surface wise, it's going to give you more reach instead of the cab blocking you.
Get the cab out of the way, right?
Yeah. And I thought, and I'll be honest with you, because I've been on rear mounts and snorkels. I never thought about that, because I know the key with a snorkel, John, is you better get the ass end where you want to go, because when you're 45 degrees, you have a lot of reach. The lower and the higher you go with a snorkel, the less reach you have. Right. So again, apparatus positioning is huge. And that was a little hint for those of you out there that are driving mid-mounts. That whole thing, when you pull up, as you get ready, you're coming to a stop, take the steering wheel and throw it 5 to 15 degrees away from the building that you're responding to, and that'll help you with your reach if you have to, like John said, clearing the cab out of the way so you're not stuck with just
Right.
half of your scrub service and that.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts before we close this one out when it comes to
Hey,
apparatus position?
I got one more thing for you, and I'm sure you saw this. Scott Thompson put a squad in service. Did you see it?
Yes.
And I saw it today on Facebook, and I had a comment. Paramedic Squad Company 18 at the Colony down there in Texas, and he had some real nice words about putting it in service and why they did it instead of getting a new ladder truck and all this. And I'm looking at the 18, I'm saying, I wonder, and sure enough it was. Sure enough, he said it was, in memory of Andy Fredericks, who, died on 9/11 with the rest of the crew, along with Billy McGinn and all the boys in Squad 18 on 9/11. And I just thought that was so very cool and respectful that he did that. And I must tell you, I went to Andy's wife on Facebook, and I took a picture, and I forwarded it to her, and I said, hey, take a look at this squad down in Texas that was, the unit number and the squad company. The designation was in honor of Andy. I wrote your Andy
nice.
like that to her. She was very happy. She wrote back. She said, thanks, Chief. So it was very
Nice.
cool.
Well, Scott, Scott taught for you and I at FDIC for years in our Saving Our Own and Get Out Live
I
program.
got pictures left in front of the building. Yeah.
And he very well knew Andy and been with us a long time. And
Doing great. He's writing. He's got a book now and everything.
Scott's one of those guys that gets it. He was the training chief of Louisville for a long time, and he gets it. He gets it. And he's another one of those guys where if you don't like how he runs things, then you're not. I'll just say it, you're a shitty firefighter. If you don't want to work for him, you don't want you don't want to be into the job, then you suck. And you may not agree with everything a boss is going to say, no matter who you are, but he gets it. Real quick, John, that fire I was talking about, that third alarm, and for our listeners, was at 48 East 7th Street, Manhattan. The apparatus placement, on both sides, it's a corner building, multiple floors with one bucket up to one side, an aerial to the other, another bucket to the windows, another aerial on the third. If you want to see how it's like someone took a bunch of little Matchbox trucks and stuck them all together. What a great job with ladder and engine placement. Hats off to the FDNY again for doing a great job. But so, John, any other thoughts on apparatus place before we close this one out?
Yeah, so there's so much more. We're gonna have to hit it again, but I thought it was a good little preview, maybe,
Well, you talked about, we talked about pre-planning, training, knowing your rigs, knowing your neighborhood, communication between the two chauffeurs, the two drivers on the engine and ladder. Again, positioning is everything, folks. It's one thing to not be able to get the line charged and get water to the fire quickly. It's another thing to not even have your rigs in the right place.
Right, we'll have somebody hanging out a window and unable to get the ladder to them. That's tough.
Exactly. Get out. Hey, get out with your engine and truck. Know your area. So, hey, with that, buddy, that wraps up another one. We always try to keep these fairly short for folks that are out there. We're getting a lot of great feedback from you guys saying it's perfect when you're working out or driving to and from work or sitting around the firehouse.
Hope they're enjoying them.
That's it. Hey, give us a holler. I'm at chieflasky@gmail.com. John, you're at?
Chief John Salka @gmail.com.
Hey, we always ask you to please keep the men and women, our armed forces, in your thoughts and prayers. And really, really right now, please say a prayer for our brothers and sisters in blue on the law enforcement side. It's horrible what's going on, and our hearts go out to them and their families. So keep them in your thoughts. With that, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening, and be safe, and God bless you.